Okay, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. And today I'm joined by the Baltimore City Deputy Mayor, Anthony Barksdale, Baltimore Police Department Commissioner Michael Harrison, Director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, Shante Jackson, the Deputy State's Attorney Thomas Donnelly, and members of the Baltimore Police Department's Group Reduction Violence Unit, as well as members of my team. As we announced the indictment of 9 individuals known as the WIC Squad, a drug trafficking organization operating primarily in the 2500 block of Edmondson Avenue in West Baltimore. The individuals are charged with as many as 40 counts, including possession with intent to distribute fentanyl and cocaine, conspiracy to distribute controlled dangerous substances, and firearms offenses. The individuals indicted and pending trial are 34-year-old Jermaud Harris, 33-year-old Darnell Faulkner, 32-year-old Jamal Thompson, 31-year-old Tevin Holmes, 30-year-old Justin Gregory, 31-year-old Devin McCoy. I want to make clear that a criminal indictment is merely an allegation of wrongdoing, and these individuals are presumed innocent unless and until the state proves their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The remaining 3 individuals were indicted earlier in 2022, while the broader investigation was ongoing, and have already pled guilty and been sentenced. They are 35-year-old Jerome Lewis, who was sentenced to 12 years, suspending all but 5 years without parole. 29-year-old Arthur Beard, who was sentenced to 4 years, suspending all but 3 years, and 29-year-old James Jones, who was sentenced to 20 years, suspending all but 3 years. Each of their sentences will be followed by supervision and supervised probation upon their release. All of the defendants are from Baltimore except Devin McCoy, who's from Virginia. None of the defendants have known addresses in the 2500 block of Edmondson Avenue. In February of last year, the Baltimore Police Department's Group Reduction Violence Unit began an investigation into the Edmondson Avenue corridor in the Western District of Baltimore City due to an uptick in violent crime in the area and the existence of an open-air drug market operating in the community. Soon thereafter, our office, the Office of the Attorney General, joined the investigation and partnered with the Baltimore Police Department through the conclusion of the investigation. The investigation was a coordinated effort under the Maryland Criminal Intelligence Network and the city's Group Violence Reduction Strategy. The investigation utilized a variety of investigative methods, including the use of undercover Baltimore Police Department detectives to make controlled purchases of narcotics, including fentanyl. The investigation culminated in search warrants and arrests in October of last year. The most recent arrest took place this month. In total, the investigation led to the seizure of 11 firearms and large amounts of fentanyl and cocaine, ammunition, and packaging material. Fentanyl, as we are all aware, is deadly. It's a synthetic opioid that, according to the CDC, can be 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. Even a very small amount can be lethal. About 2/3 of overdose deaths in the United States have been linked to fentanyl and other powerful, illicitly made synthetic opioids. Additionally, in the last decade, there's been close to a 500% increase in the number of cocaine-related deaths in Maryland. The vast majority of those deaths were in combination with fentanyl. Today's announcement is the first of many announcements to come. Our organized crime unit has been and will continue to be working in partnership with local, state, and federal law enforcement and prosecutors to dismantle and disrupt violent criminal organizations and stop individuals who are trafficking these deadly substances and wreaking havoc in our communities. That is why I've asked the governor and the legislature to provide funding to double the organized crime unit in the Office of the Attorney General so that we can continue supporting the important work of our law enforcement partners. I want to thank the chief of our organized crime unit, Katie Dorian, our Senior Assistant Attorney General Jared Albert, Assistant Attorney General Shannon Price, and the brave men and women of the Baltimore City Police Department. Additionally, we appreciate the support of the FBI, the Howard County Police Department, the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, and the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement during the investigation. And with that, let me turn it over to Police Commissioner Michael Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General, and good morning, and thank you all for joining us today. And before I begin, I want to acknowledge members of our group violence unit and anti-crime section who are here with us, both Sergeants Garrett and Sergeant Cox. Thank you for your continued service to the citizens of Baltimore and for your thorough investigation in bringing these suspects to justice. As the Attorney General mentioned, this was a joint investigation with the department's group violence unit and the Attorney General's office with the support from multiple local, state, and federal partners. This case is another example of our strong partnerships formed to reduce violent crime and remove violent offenders from our streets. Our department is singularly focused on reducing homicides and non-fatal shootings in our city. And this was just the latest in a series of operations that illustrates our progress with the commitment to the group violence reduction strategy. The GVRS is a partnership of law enforcement, community members, and service providers who work to give violent groups pathways away from crime, to make a change and use resources to stop engaging in violence. While we take proactive measures to reach out to group members and give them resources, we also say that if you do not stop violence, we will follow up on our promise to hold them accountable. And today we are holding a violent group accountable. Since piloting the group violence reduction strategy in our Western District last year, we've seen a 34% decrease in homicides and non-fatal shootings in historically the most violent district. And as a result of the investigation into the WIC squad, officers seized, as you've heard, multiple firearms, including ghost guns, several cartridges, magazines, and other weapon accessories, hundreds of gel caps of heroin, hundreds of vials of crack cocaine, large amounts of currency, cell phones, digital scales, and various cutting agencies and materials used to prepare drug sales for the streets of our city. We believe this investigation helped to prevent shootings in recent months. And we anticipate that ballistics testing of the recovered firearms could potentially lead to other crimes committed by these individuals. All of the suspects arrested have extensive criminal backgrounds, including armed robbery, assault, and even first-degree attempted murder. The 11 recovered firearms, including ghost guns, speak to the growing trend of these untraceable firearms in our streets and in the hands of those prohibited from having these weapons. Last year, the department removed more guns from the streets of Baltimore, specifically 2,653, with gun seizures up 14%, and then ghost seizures, 485, which were up more than 40%. Public safety is a shared responsibility that requires a successful partnership between law enforcement, social services, and our community. We can only help those who most want to be a part of the solution and provide them with services and pathways away from crime. For these individuals, accepting help is not a requirement, but reducing violence is. So I want to take the time to thank the men and women of the Baltimore Police Department who continue to go out each and every day to serve and protect and work with our communities to make our neighborhoods safer. I have said it before, I'll continue to say it. Those who commit violent offenses will be held to account by this police department. I want to thank each of our partners who worked alongside BPD in identifying and arresting these individuals. I look forward to many more successful partnerships that lead to reducing homicides and non-fatal shootings in Baltimore. And at this time, I will now hand it over to Director Jackson of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement.
Good morning, folks. My name's Shantae Jackson, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement. Our agency is the one that is responsible both for managing and coordinating the group violence reduction strategy. Our work through the strategy and through our violence reduction efforts in Baltimore is deeply rooted in keeping our residents safe, alive, and free. Over the course of the last year, GVRS has proven to be an effective approach to violence reduction and a life-saving mechanism in the Western District. As the police commissioner mentioned, the Western District is Baltimore's most historically violent district. We closed out 2022 yielding a 34% aggregate decrease in homicides and non-fatal shootings by targeting group-involved individuals who were willing to walk away from violence in exchange for services and resources they needed to make it from one day to the next. By the end of our year-long pilot, 71 people had chosen to accept services, support, and opportunity through this strategy. They chose to walk away from violence. Through service provision like life coaching and wraparound supports, and a mayor and partners like the Attorney General and the state's attorney's office who deeply believe that there is an alternative to solely relying on policing, prosecution, and prisons, the Western District has gone from being the most violent district in Baltimore City as it relates to gun violence to being the least violent among our other chronically violent districts. Now, let me be clear. When I say that sending young men to prison is not the goal of this strategy, it's an absolute last resort and a result of a delicate balance of positive opportunity and punitive consequence that the strategy offers. And we will not tolerate violence in our city. Our elders, our children, our village deserve better. The individuals that were arrested are not only implicated in group violence, but have also made life-altering decisions that have broken up families and imposed trauma on the West Baltimore community. We are here today because of their decision to continue to perpetrate violence in our city and because we hold firm on our commitment of both positive opportunity and punitive consequence. Because of the work of the Scott administration and the partners that are standing with me today, because of the group violence reduction strategy, people have a choice to save lives and to change the trajectory of their journey for the better. For those that make another decision, like those members of the WIC squad, these are the consequences. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to the Attorney General.
Thank you. Great. Any questions?
How many more members of the WIC squad do you think are still out there that you guys are still investigating?
Well, I will say that although we did this takedown, the investigation, parts of it still continue. And so while we took down 6 who you've heard are already convicted and sentenced, took down 3 and then 6 more, you will likely see the potential for others as we continue the investigation. There is the potential that there are others who are connected in some form or fashion who could be indicted as a result of what we're doing right now.
What can you tell us about the WIC squad? I know this is just a half mile from the Princess Plaza where you all announced that takedown of the drug trafficking organization. Is this believed to be related? Are these the same people or different organizations?
Well, we will say that they were a drug trafficking organization who was involved in trafficking, wholesale and retail within this community, and members of this organization individually and collectively have been associated to violence committed in our city.
But are they related to those who are operating in Princess Plaza?
Well, I don't know that we should answer that like that today. What we can say is that this was an independent major drug trafficking organization that was committing so much trafficking in the community and violence in the community that it warranted our attention specifically on them. And this is the result of community complaints and community bringing information about what they don't want to see in their neighborhood and what they want to get rid of. And this is the result of us paying attention and hearing them and then taking action.
And you mentioned they all have criminal histories, repeat violent offenders, if you will.
Some are repeat violent offenders, yes.
Collectively, what are you all doing to ensure that these individuals just aren't right back on the streets reoffending?
Well, I think that is what you've heard us all say. That is the central core mission of the group violence reduction strategy. Not only to enforce those who want to commit violence and who we catch committing violence, but to help them make better decisions and have a pathway away. So, yes, we will now proceed with full prosecution of these individuals, but we will also work to help them change their lives so that they don't go back and reoffend. But we're sending a message to others that this is the consequence that you will pay if that is the life you choose. However, we are here through the group violence reduction strategy to offer you a way out.
Commissioner, what is the suspended time and the 3 sentences that have been handed down. Are you satisfied with that? 20 years, suspend all but 3, 12 years, suspend all but 5?
Well, it is my job to make sure our officers do their job. It is my job to make sure we satisfy the citizens' complaints of removing drug trafficking organizations from their community. We did that. We will continue to do that. This group talked about that just a little while ago, how we move forward doing this faster and more often. It is not my job to talk about how other people perceive justice. I will say that we did exactly what the community members asked us to do.
Commissioner, you talked about this being a last resort to incarcerate, or incarceration being a last resort, and how that ties into the group violence reduction strategy. Could you give us a better sense of what the conversations were like? Were these individuals offered services of some kind? Sure, go ahead.
I'll let Director Jackson.
Thank you for the question. So the process associated with the group violence reduction strategy revolves around a core component that we call deconfliction. And so if we are having conversations with our prosecutorial partners and we come to the understanding that there are active investigations associated with individuals who are group member involved, it would be disingenuous of us to offer them opportunities only to then turn around and indict them. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that a custom notification or direct communication isn't happening to those individuals. In cases like that, it would be a law enforcement only conversation, which is very similar to the one that we have when we do a full notification, which is stop engaging in violence. But there is typically no offer of opportunity at that time. Now, once an individual is indicted and or incarcerated, to the point that the police commissioner and I make all the time, rehabilitation is key. And so making sure that we're partnering with DPSCS and with parole and probation are key to successes there.
So just to be clear, in this case, were these individuals offered social services?
I would need to look specifically at these individuals and come back to you to answer that question, but it is not our practice, once deconfliction has happened, to offer individuals who we know are being targeted for strategic enforcement to offer services to.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
How do you see this fitting into sort of the larger goals of GVRS? I think some people would argue that getting to the point of indictment and arrest is a failure of some other sort of upstream parts of the GVRS process. Do you see it that way? How does this fit into the mission of the GVRS?
So I want to be clear in restating the goal of the group violence reduction strategy. It's quite simple. We want to keep people safe, alive, and free. And the way that is done is by balancing opportunity with consequence. And so we are actively having conversations with folks who we believe to be group member involved about opportunities that are afforded to them to walk away from a life of violence. At the same time, those folks who do not make that decision, we make it very clear what the consequences will be. And so this strategy is one that is a very delicately balanced one. It is our last resort to incarcerate individuals. And at the same time, Baltimore deserves to be safe. Baltimore deserves to not live in fear. Baltimore deserves hope. And so this strategy very intentionally seeks to provide folks with a decision, a choice that they ultimately make a decision on and then deal with the consequences of.
Can you say more about the connections of these individuals to violent crime? I didn't see a whole lot on the sheet kind of outlining their specific connections to violence.
Well, I mentioned it in my remarks. Some are tied to violent offenses, robberies. There are some, could be multiple first-degree attempted murder. So there are connections and correlations between the drug trafficking organization and crimes that either were committed by them or those somewhat connected to them in some way. And so we believe that the complaints that come in from the community about the drug trafficking organization and the crimes, the violent crime that's committed in the community that could be a result or tied to it, we believe we address that by focusing on this organization and then taking them down.
Is there
Okay.
anything you can tell us about those attempted murders?
Not at this time. All right. Thank you all.